All right, well, welcome to another week. I hope you had a really good Lord's Day yesterday. I know I sure did. And let's just jump right into it today. This is a passage of scripture from the book of Jeremiah, which is one of my favorite books. I know I always say that, but they're all my favorite. Jeremiah chapter 6, starting in verse 11. These are the words of God. Therefore I am full of the fury of the Lord. I am weary with holding it in. I will pour it out upon the children abroad and upon the assembly of young men together, for even the husband with the wife shall be taken, the aged with him that is full of days. And their houses shall be turned unto others, with their fields and wives together, for I will stretch out my hand upon the inhabitants of the land, saith the Lord. For from the least of them, even unto the greatest of them, every one is given to covetousness, and from the prophet, even unto the priest, every one dealeth falsely. They have healed also the hurt of the daughter of my people slightly, saying, Peace, peace, when there is no peace. Were they ashamed when they had committed abomination? Nay, they were not ashamed at all, neither could they blush. Therefore they shall fall among them that fall. At the time that I visit them, they shall be cast down, saith the Lord. This is a video about the absolute insanity that our leadership promotes. And I'm talking about evangelical leaderships, the conference speakers, the authors, the people that, represent evangelicals to the world. The absolute insanity that they display every single day. It gets worse and worse and worse. The hand of the Lord is truly upon us. Yeah, so I was just kind of taking a little stroll around the neighborhood of Twitter on Saturday, I believe. And I just have to say, the only way I can describe it is I think God has made us stupid. Like, God has made us not able to think clearly, not able to really see what we're doing with our actions and our words. Like, we contradict ourselves, and I'm talking the collective we as evangelicals. We contradict ourselves one moment to the next, and we just don't see it. And if we do see it, then then the people that are doing this are just pure evil. And I have a hard time, just assuming people are pure evil. You know what I mean? So I have to think that they just don't see how contradictory they're being, how they're not making any sense at all, and how while they think they're being prophetic, all they're doing is just mimicking the world, doing what the world is doing. They're not being prophetic in any way. I've done videos about this where I talk about the Gospel Coalition will put out an article about how you should be countercultural, gospel-centered in these areas. And like line by line, every single one of them that they say is countercultural is the opposite of countercultural. It's going with the flow. It's going with the zeitgeist. It's doing what the world is doing. And so it's just such a scam. It's such a scam. But this weekend, this became so abundantly clear. And what happened was that the Congressman John Lewis passed away from pancreatic cancer. Very, very sad. John Lewis, when people die, I don't like to say things about them, especially if they're not good people. But in this case, I'm going to, because I think it's important for the point of this video. The point of this video is not about John Lewis. The point of this video is about Christian leaders responding to this death of John Lewis. John Lewis was an advocate for black rights. And I'm using that term because I don't think it's fair to call him a civil rights advocate, because back in the day when he was fighting for black rights, that was an important civil rights issue, no question about it. But see, if you look at the man's life, we have 80 years of his life to look at. He actually wasn't for civil rights. Civil rights is too general a term for him, because if you look at his voting record and the things he promoted, he absolutely was integral. He was a key proponent. He was consistent, never saw a law he didn't like in support of killing unborn children. He wanted more people to have access to kill their unborn children. He wanted people to have free access to killing their unborn children. He wanted to expand the killing of unborn children. And to him, that was a right. So he was upside down. You see, he was calling good evil, evil good later in his life. And so I can be very pleased with the fact that he supported black rights in the 60s and 70s or whatever. I can be very happy about that because, at the end of the day, depending on how you define black, some people say if you have an ounce of black blood in you, then you're black. well, I've got 20% Nigerian blood in my veins. So I'm grateful for his support of black rights, because black rights are a good thing. Black rights are a Christian thing. We should support black rights. You know what I mean? But he wasn't a courageous, heroic civil rights leader, because he decided to abandon civil rights when he got into Congress. You understand what I'm saying? Like we can call a spade here. I'm a Christian. I'm not afraid to call it how it is. He was for civil rights when it was black rights, but he was against civil rights when it was abortion rights and the rights of the unborn. Because the reality is, like, that is a very important issue. That's a current issue. That's a current injustice. And we need to be able to fight the battles that we're currently fighting, not yesterday's battles. But I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. This passage from Jeremiah is important because there were leaders, prophets, and priests of Israel in the days when things weren't going well for Israel, and the people of Israel weren't ashamed of the atrocities that were going on around them. And some of them they were participating in. They just weren't ashamed of it. And they were saying things are fine. Everything's fine. It's all fine here. You know that meme with the dog when everything's burning around him. He's like, this is fine. That's what those prophets were doing. They were saying peace, peace, but there was no peace. And God was about to come destroy them. And there's only one way to really interpret this, because if everything's burning around you like that dog, right? And you're like, this is fine. Something has happened to your mind, because there's fire everywhere. Obviously, there's a battle raging around you, and you just don't see it. You've been made stupid. And I think that the Bible says that God does make people stupid. He blinds the eyes of people regularly to accomplish his purposes. That's something that God actively does. And I just don't think that the prophets and priests in the book of Jeremiah were just like, they just happened to be stupid. I think God was blinding them for judgment. He was making them preach peace, because they couldn't see it. Not because they were just stupid. It's because God blinded their eyes to what was happening. He made them so that they were not ashamed of the abominations that they were participating in. He made them that way. And he did that as a form of his judgment against the people. And I think he does that today as well. Let's take a little stroll on Twitter here. This is the first one I saw. This was Matthew Hall. So this is the first virtue signal that I saw. He says, thankful for the life and courage of John Lewis. He demonstrated love in action even as a young man and thrust onto the stage of leadership. Several years ago, Eric Iverson graciously gave me this copy of his photo signed by Lewis. The inscription, "Keep the Faith." The implication here is that John Lewis was a great Christian. He was a courageous and loving great Christian. And you see how he words this, even as a young man. So you would think that if he's saying even as a young man he was courageous and loving, then as an old man he was courageous and loving too. And that is simply not the case at all. He's like, biblically speaking, rationally thinking, any Christian who's thinking the way a Christian ought to be thinking, who hasn't been blinded by God, can say, yeah, he did some great things for black rights, but then when he grew up, he became a monster. He became a monster. We have to really internalize like what abortion is. I heard that Kanye was crying as he talked about abortion yesterday, and rightfully so. Like, I'm not a crier. Like, I just don't cry very often. But when I think about what's actually happening in abortion, it does something to me, man. It does something to me. But here we are, Matthew Hall, sees the opportunity to signal how good he is and how great he is, and instead all he ends up doing is proving that he's one of these prophets and priests that's saying peace, peace, when there is no peace. Not ashamed of the abominations. Not ashamed. Let's check out another one. This is Albert Mohler. Right, Albert Mohler, stalwart conservative. He'll tell you all day long his conservative bona fides. Yeah, I was in the conservative resurgence. People often do this. They talk about abortion as one of their bona fides, right? But as you'll see, I don't think that's actually really most evangelical leaders aren't against abortion. They'll call themselves pro-life, but they're actually not against abortion the way they ought to be. Here's what Al Mohler had to say. Representative John Lewis's story is integral to telling the American story. His courage and suffering in the civil rights movement are inspirational to all Americans. He will be honored in the American memory. Now, let's stop there. There's one more sentence. I want to get to that in a second, but let me just stop there. Partial credit here, because I agree that John Lewis's story is integral to telling the American story. I'm not the kind of guy that says we need to cancel every aspect of our past that is a little bit twisted up with sin and stuff like that. That's you guys, actually, Albert Mohler and Matt Hall. That's you guys who believe that. But okay, let's just pause a second. Yeah, I think that John Lewis did have a lot of courage, and he suffered during the Black rights movement, the Black civil rights movement. That's inspirational, and I agree. But then later in life, he became a monster. Okay, so we can talk about that as well. And here's what Al Mohler says about that, because he knows he has to tip his hat to that kind of stuff. He has to tip his hat to the part of his life that's reprehensible, that's abominable, that we should all be ashamed of, right? Inspiration for the Black rights stuff, but we should be ashamed of this part of John Lewis's life. He says this: "We dare not extend honor only to those with whom we are in agreement politically." Al Mohler has been made stupid by God, because I don't understand how anybody could come up with the idea that killing babies in the womb, and in John Lewis's case, partially out of the womb as well, like born babies, infanticide, according to any definition, infanticide is a political disagreement. That's a political disagreement. But somehow, wealth and income disparities, these are gospel issues that every Christian ought to, everything should be even, Steven. That's a gospel issue, wealth inequalities, but infanticide, political disagreement. Al Mohler has been made stupid. Al Mohler is one of these that is saying, peace, peace, when there is no peace. No one is stupider than Russell Moore, though. Russell Moore has been blinded to the nth degree. The fact that anybody follows Russell Moore at this point is just a testament to how far under judgment the United States is. And to be honest, that gives me a little bit of anxiety, how far along we are in this process, how much God has made our leaders blind, how much the hand of restraint has been lifted from the evil in the United States. This is something that we should not trifle with. This is something that is no small thing. This is a big deal. Here's Russell Moore. What a loss to this country. I'm grateful for John Lewis's courage and endurance and patriotism. I agree with the many who have said so. There's a bridge in Selma that needs a new name. What he wants you to do is name a bridge or a symbol after John Lewis. Maybe even erect a statue or two. Maybe that's a good idea, right? Because, John Lewis, he was for Black rights and all of these kinds of things. But again, how can Russell Moore say this when yesterday he's lamenting the Confederate flag because of the evil of slavery, right? The evil of slavery. We can't have these flags and these statues and things like that because of the evil that it represents, right? But what we can do is name a bridge after John Lewis. Name a bridge after someone who has abandoned civil rights to such a degree that he is okay with a baby being born and then killed. A baby being born and then killed. That's how twisted of a monster John Lewis became later in life. He was a twisted monster. He was a tyrant. He was a beast. That's the kind of man John Lewis became later in life. But we can name a bridge after him, definitely. But, of course, the Southern Baptist flag and the Confederate flag, Russell Moore is crying like a little girl because the Southern Baptist Convention condemns the symbol of hate that the Confederate flag is. But, of course, naming a bridge after this guy, partial birth abortion John Lewis, of course, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. And so there's a few different ways to take this. Now, all of these men claim to be speaking prophetically into the culture, but all of these men have been made stupid. They're the priests and the prophets that Jeremiah talks about, the ones that weren't ashamed of abominations. He's not ashamed to name a bridge after someone who is a prophet of Baal, a priest of Baal. Someone who wants to make this a fundamental human right, the right to kill your own child if you see fit. If maybe if you don't have enough money, you want things to go better for yourself economically, it's okay to kill your own child, even after they're born. He doesn't see the inconsistency here. Russell Moore doesn't see it. Or maybe he does. But I don't think he does. I think he's been made stupid. And so the reality is that we can look at this a few different ways. Either he doesn't think that abortion is a civil rights issue, which I think he said it's a civil rights issue before. Either he doesn't think it is, which I don't think we can go that route with him because he's said it's a civil rights issue, or Russell Moore is pro-choice. And I know that might be hard to hear because he said a lot about abortion, right? But hear me out here. Because if access to abortion doesn't disqualify you from having a bridge named after you, but racism or slavery does, then presumably we're going to have to say that at the very least, abortion is worse than racism. Or I'm sorry, racism is worse than abortion. Slavery is worse than abortion. Or at the least, Russell Moore is one of these guys that says we shouldn't criminalize abortion, but we should try to limit it as much as possible. We should try to make it rare, which is basically what all pro-choice people said a decade ago, right? So I think, here's what I think. This is my opinion. I think Russell Moore is where he is at. These people, Matthew Hall, Albert Mohler, functionally, this is where they're at. They're at wherever the pro-choicers were 10 years ago. They want to make abortion safe and rare. Safe and rare. That's where I think they're at. They're not looking this as murder. They might say it's murder, but they definitely don't want to treat it like murder. Because if John Lewis is a pro-murder politician, which I would say he definitely is, a pro-murder politician, and Russell Moore believed that, there wouldn't be, I mean, unless he's just really just a political pawn or just an operative, he would never have said this about naming a bridge after a pro-murder politician. Albert Mohler would never have said this about a pro-murder politician. Matthew Hall would never have said this about a pro-murder politician. So the only conclusion, this is the nicest conclusion I can come to for these three and the many others that have done this. They actually don't think it's murder. They actually don't think that abortion is murdering a child, an image bearer of God. They must not, because otherwise, how could they do this? So there's really only a few choices here, and if you've noticed, I'm kind of struggling to figure out which one to go with here. Like, are they just stupid? Has God blinded them this much that they don't see? Or are they pro-choice functionally? Pro-life in name only, pro-choice functionally, where it should be safe and rare, as opposed to criminalized and prosecuted with the death penalty. Because if you're going to actually care about justice, civil rights, the Bible, loving your neighbor, then abortion needs to be criminalized immediately, punishable by the death penalty. Because that's what God's law requires. That's what biblical justice requires. And so never mind the fact that these people have been made stupid by God. Never mind the fact that these people are pretending to be prophets, but really they're just going along with the flow. That's what Jeremiah was talking about here. Like these prophets were pretending to prophesy, but they were just telling people what they wanted to hear, right? They were telling people what they wanted to hear. And that's what Matthew Hall's doing here. That's how Albert Mohler is treating it here, and that's how Russell Moore is treating it here. They want you, they know that people want to hear how courageous John Lewis was, and ignoring the massive injustices that he promoted, the massive civil rights injustices that he promoted to the day he died. The day he died, he promoted civil rights injustices. He abandoned the cause of civil rights when he became a politician. He abandoned it. He was good on black rights, terrible on civil rights. And so they know that you don't want to hear that, right? And so they're one of these prophets that pretends to prophesy, but really they're just telling you what you want to hear. They're those in Jeremiah that said peace, peace, when there was no peace. Let me show you what actually speaking prophetically into the culture looks like. This is a tweet from Marcus Pittman. And here we've got the bridge, right? Here's the bridge that should be named after John Lewis. Here's John Lewis putting himself in the gap here so that people, tons of people, can go to Planned Parenthood and murder their own children. You see, I know that Matthew Hall and Albert Mohler and Russell Moore, they're full of it. They're full of it. They don't care about justice. They don't care about racism. They don't care about statistical disparities, none of that stuff. All of this stuff is just a means to an end. And I don't know what that end is. For some, it could be power. For some, it could be money. For some, it could be prestige. For some, it could be sex. I have no freaking idea. But you know how I know they don't care about any of this stuff? Because if you look at the race issue and statistical disparities when it comes to abortion, you would have to say that people that are pro-abortion are actually anti-black. If you actually believe this statistical disparity type stuff that proves racism somehow, I don't believe that stuff. But if you do, like they claim to, you look at the statistical disparities, look at the numbers of the amount of black babies that are killed in abortion, and you would have to come out strong against abortion rights. You couldn't possibly be advocating to name a bridge after someone who was responsible for so many black deaths. So many. You see, guys like Russell Moore and Albert Mohler and Matthew Hall, they're actually not after anything of any principle. They're after prestige for themselves. They want a virtue signal. They want you to think they're great guys. They're good. They're not those kind of conservatives. They actually don't care what God says. And that's the point. These tweets prove it beyond all doubt. These people have lost their ever-loving minds. And it's time for us to replace this leadership. This leadership is impotent. This leadership is cowardly. This leadership has no principles whatsoever except to accumulate more power for themselves. And if you can't see it by this point, I mean, I guess I got a bridge to sell you. But anyway, I hope you found this video helpful. We just need to we need to figure this out, man. We got to get rid of these prophets and priests that are not willing to actually speak the words of God to the culture. We need to get rid of them. We need to have leadership that at the very least can be consistent. That's it. I don't need you to be talking loudly or aggressively or getting in people's faces. I don't need any of that stuff. I just need you to be consistent a little bit. A little bit. If you're going to cancel Confederates, which I've said many times, I don't care about statues. I just don't care. But if you're going to go and do that, then you need to do it consistently. You can't be advocating that John Lewis is the greatest guy since sliced bread if you're going to tell me that Stonewall Jackson was essentially the devil. Anyway, I hope you found this video helpful. God bless. Yeah, you know, you may have noticed that, I don't know, this video, I feel like it was a little scattered. At least that's how I feel. Maybe you don't feel the same way, but I honestly, I almost don't even know what to say. I kind of understand. I feel like I understand the book of Jeremiah a little bit more, because when you read Jeremiah, you can see there's a bit of exasperation with Jeremiah, and at the end of the day, he just kind of calls out to God. He just cries out for mercy, and you know, he's known as the weeping prophet. It's full of lament and stuff like that, and I just like I kind of understand that, because it's like, how has this happened? Like I don't really know what to do about this. Like Al Mohler and Russell Moore and Matthew Hall, these are the guys that they call themselves conservatives. These are the guys that represent us to the world, and their minds have been turned into mush. They're not consistent. They're not thinking the way a human being ought to think. Someone made in the image of God should be thinking in a rational, logical way. They're just not at all. And the only conclusion I can come to is that God has done this. God, this is God's doing. Like, these people will produce articles and they'll be seriously questioning whether or not John Edwards was a Christian, because, you know, he was a chaplain on a slave ship, and whether or not, you know, Dabney was a believer because, you know, he was in the Confederacy and he said some things about black people that weren't good. Like, people will seriously debate this stuff, and they'll wonder, well, can they even be a Christian? And then these same people in today's issues with abortion, like, way worse than slavery ever was. Abortion, way worse than slavery ever was. It's happening right now. And they're like, well, you know, let's name a bridge after this guy's a great, courageous brother in Christ. Let's keep the faith. And it's just like do they hear themselves? but I can't come to no other conclusion. But the Lord has done this. And so the only one who can fix it is the Lord. I can't fix this. We can't fix this. And so that's what we need to do. We just need to call out to the Lord, because he's the one who has blinded them so much, and he's the only one that can fix them. Anyway, God bless.